This presentation is about the occupation retail manager occupation that was recently introduced to SID 482 visa. This occupation has been available for regional visas such as RSMS 187 back in the days and 494, so regional employer sponsored visa, and now the 482. So for the 482, it's brand new because it's so new, and it just also means that it's not region specific or region locked. So metropolitan Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne retail businesses may be able to take advantage of it. But I'm just trying to cover, I guess, maybe challenges that one may face if they try to sponsor somebody under this occupation. And if they're not very prepared, immigration may refuse this application. And now that's what I'm going to go through today. So that's me. So the objective is to understand the key changes of the 482 visa, clarify role differences between retail manager and retail supervisor. So retail manager is the occupation that's available. Retail supervisor is not. Retail supervisor on the ANSCO, it's defined as a skill level 4 occupation, and it is not a skilled occupation that's eligible for any sponsored work visa. Quite possibly it's on maybe a Dharma regions. I'm not too sure. I haven't seen it. Certainly for the 482, the core skilled migration, core skilled stream, it's not on the occupation list. And the reason why I'm going to talk about this in detail is that is the main reason why immigration refuses retail manager nominations by stating that, the nominated position resembles more of a retail supervisor than a manager. And that seems to be the main reason, primary reason why they refuse. So learn about common reasons for refusal, that's what I have just mentioned, and gain insights from tribunal cases. So tribunal cases are always a good indication, not just for this case, this type of cases, but for any cases, because whether if we win the tribunal or lose the tribunal, they always provide very detailed reasons. And that's why I like to study the tribunal cases. And of course, noting that tribunal cases do not form precedents. So immigration or any other authorities, or even the tribunal themselves, do not have to follow what other members and what other similar decisions or similar cases have decided on. But it's always a good reference for us to take, because you do learn some new techniques or new knowledge from looking at what other clients and what other cases have gone through. Learn how to prepare and strong nomination and avoid refusal. So by studying the successful cases, and identifying the common elements, that's what we want to be able to put our knowledge upon, and also be able to advise our clients, and also identify whether our clients or our inquiries that we receive for similar cases, we are able to identify whether if it may work or may not work. Okay, so visa changes. The 482 visa changed or rebranded as skills in demand. They got rid of the short-term and medium-term stream, and primarily it's now core skilled stream, and then specialist skills stream if the salary is higher than currently 135,000 Australian dollars. And with the introduction of the CSOL, they removed some occupations which I still am a little bit puzzled, such as cafe and restaurant manager, but then they've introduced more generic occupations such as a retail manager. I'm a bit puzzled by it, but I'm sure they have their own reasons. About the impact, so specifically for the retail manager, new opportunities. So, when we talk about retail managers, it could apply to just your ordinary clothing stores that you might walk past in your local suburb, Westfields, or shopping centers, any of the businesses like tobacconists, news agency and such. So, and including of course fast foods like McDonald's, Subway, even local Asian grocery stores. Retail managers. Retail manager versus retail supervisor, key difference. Again, this is the reason why we need to know. So after this, I didn't include the specific ANSCO code, like the descriptor here, but I hope that you really do study the two in detail. So for the retail manager, if I were to summarize it into one sentence, it's more related to strategic operational side. But to me, it's more like this. Retail manager should really operate as if they're the owner of the business. except for all the liabilities, I guess. So if you actually own a clothing store, you would be responsible in making sure that the budgeting is done correctly, ordering the goods, importing, or maybe from like a wholesalers or directly from China or other countries. So making sure that your inventory is adequately prepared and such. So that's what I would expect retail managers to be. Retail supervisor is, the one that is able to supervise your store in the retail manager's absence. So from my experience dealing with similar cases, what generally we expect of a retail supervisor is somebody who's there when the manager's off duty. Like, the managers are generally expected to, work full time, 38 to 40 hours, and then hours outside of their normal rosters, supervisors there. So a store cannot have two managers, or they don't normally accept two managers, because one person having a majority of the responsibility is generally accepted, and supervisor is just a supervisor or second in charge for the store it's running. So if you do compare and contrast the ANSCO descriptor, like the tasks, retail supervisor is capable of underdoing the human resources part of the work, such as interviewing and hiring new staff. So they're very quite similar, but I guess more emphasis is given to the manager for actual operational and management of the business. So as I mentioned earlier, the department often refuses the manager nominations, citing that it reflects more of a supervisor roles. And so it sort of goes back to my way of thinking, which is retail managers should really act like the owner of the store. So if there is an actual director for the business working in the business as the nominee for the role, the immigration's attitude is always, why do you need a manager? Because the owners there, they probably act as a supervisor, and hence they refuse that on that grounds. They cite that supervisor duties. So the key thing is, because they are expected to work as if they're the owners of the store, it's very, very important for us to demonstrate that the managers have the decision-making authority. Like some examples that I also advise my clients to do is give the banking authority to the nominee. So the director to allow banking authority to the nominee gives that kind of responsibility and accountability to the manager. So the business is really able to operate without the owner's day-to-day involvement. And that's one of the key things that I always tell my clients and suggest my clients to do. And if they don't, then immigration's conclusion may actually be right. If the owners don't trust their managers to have that kind of responsibility, then they may just be a supervisor, not a manager. So common reasons for nomination refusal is lack of clear differentiation between retail supervisor role. So for this, and I'll talk about this a bit later, but having an organization chart also helps. So we can have the owner or the director of the business and also the manager, the nominee. And then if you could have a supervisor in the organizational chart, and in our legal submissions or letter of support that we can help our clients draft, clearly identifying the different positions and different roles do help differentiate the two roles, or maybe the three roles. The owner, what does he do? What does she do? What do they do? The manager, what do they do? And the supervisor, what do they do? And then justifying the need for all these three top positions for that business. And owner's active involvement on daily operations. So actually, we don't want the owner to be active in day-to-day operations of the business. We actually want the owner to be less active. What I mean by that is, ideally, before I used to do quite a lot of retail store managers for petrol stations in remote regional area. For the actual owners or the directors of those petrol stations, they live in Brisbane or Sydney, like in the metropolitan area, but they happen to own these stores in like literally in the middle of nowhere. That was a key argument that I generally put forward to the department and the authorities, that because physically the owners are not able to be at the store, not even once a month. They genuinely need a manager to be there managing the operation of the business in person on a day-to-day basis, in the physical absence of the owner. So that the physical separation between the owners' day-to-day involvement really helps the argument. Or another example that I love is type of cases that I love is if the business owner owns and operates multiple businesses. For example, I represented a case for Subway case, and the actual owners of the business owned and operated, I think, 4 different Subways, and they sponsored retail manager for one of the Subways. So we just say that they operate as a Subway group owner, and they operate the overall organization's operations, but they really do need a retail manager to specifically manage one of their stores. And their turnover was a few $1 million. So it's not something it's not a small job that they are operating. So that clear distinction and highlighting the owner's role in managing and operating the business, or lack of, really helps with the case. And business too small to justify managerial? Yeah. So even though there are retail managers, like for example local kebab shop down the road, yeah, it's a retail business, but do they really need a retail manager, especially when the minimum salary requirement is now at $73,150, and a few months later, from 1st of July, I think I read somewhere it could go up to be about 76. So can a small business like that, number one, afford a retail manager close to over $80,000 gross yearly wages, including the super? And do they really need a full-time employee who manages and oversees the operation of the business? Are they not just going to be serving the customers and making kebabs or, selling clothing? Do they really need somebody to do the administrative tasks on a full-time basis? So those are the questions that you do have to ask. So simply, just because it's a retail business does not necessarily mean that they need a retail manager for it to operate on a full-time basis. So that's the key differentiator. So the larger the business is, more stronger the case maybe. Insufficient evidence of strategic responsibility. So we don't want to just provide like a template-based list of documents like position description, employment contract, and letter of support. That's not enough when it comes to retail managers, or it was never enough when I dealt with this occupation. We needed to convince the case officers that, look, really they are going to be working as a manager, or if they already have been working as a manager, then provide evidences like receiving the stocks or the inventory items from the suppliers, or making the orders of the inventory goods, and signing any contracts on behalf of the organization or the business as the manager, having that financial authorization to do the transactions on behalf of the director or the business. So showing all of those higher level of responsibilities and accountabilities, it really does show more strategic and operational responsibilities as a manager. So those additional documentations may be required. Yeah, failure to provide financial operation, that's pretty much what I have just mentioned. So I've selected 5 of the most recent cases. I say most recent, but there haven't been much publications recently, so I've just selected something that might have interested me. One of them was a KFC franchise case. In addition to immigration saying, the nominated occupation is not a managerial role but a supervisory role, if it's a franchise business, immigration also like to use that, this is a franchise, because it's a franchise, so you don't need to have any management skills because your franchisor is gonna back you up and assist you in whatever possible way. So Department of Home Affairs in this case refused it primarily because it was a franchise model. They already have a very strict set model that the business needs to follow, and that's what they need to do. So decision making is not necessarily required. But this was a successfully overturned case. Key documents, financial records, profitability, organizational chart, and staff hierarchy. So clearly outlined. So sometimes, we use just a list of employees as an evidence to show how the business is structured. But maybe for retail management nominations and cases, I would actually do like a organizational chart. Microsoft Word have that option under the hierarchy function, and you can create visually pleasing organizational chart just to help visually show the case officers how the business is properly structured. Job description and duties analysis. So not just the job description itself, but quite possibly a legal submission and or a letter of support explaining how this position and how the nominee has worked or is about to work, their responsibilities, how do they relate to the ANSCO code and such. So duties analysis is very important. Enterprise agreements and franchise operations details. So if it was a franchise business, I generally love to get a letter of support from the actual franchisor or the regional managers. If it's a large franchise, they tend to have like a regional manager of the franchises. So getting a letter of support from somebody responsible, somebody who can represent the franchise brand, stating that for the business to operate efficiently, we really do need a manager, like skilled manager. You can't just rely on our model. It's not going to be an autonomous business thing. So you do need a skilled manager. So that type of letter of support is required, and I do make sure that we can get those when I'm taking on a case as such. Operational reports and sales data. So to show that the manager have access to this data, reason being, part of the role of a regional or the store managers they're meant to be analyzing this data and make decision and forecasts for maybe the next week or the next month or next season or whatever. So the data and being able to analyze and predict and also analyze why their losses, if they had any losses or down in sales, so being able to analyze that and then providing reports to maybe the owners or somebody up high of the organization could be very, very helpful if there are any. And then market justification, industry needs. So that's it just means as to why they need a retail manager, I believe. In this specific case, I'm not too sure exactly what it was, but I guess justifying that they couldn't find any other person to replace the nominee may have been what market and industry needs analysis have been. So why it worked, the tribunal recognized the nominees' substantial operational authority. So they're not just there serving customers, but they are there to actually oversee the operation and be involved in decision-making process. And business proved a genuine need. So of course, because they proved a genuine need, they satisfied this review of the nomination application. So KFC franchise. And then we have an Asian grocery store. I predict that we might get these upcoming relatively soon. I think we may already have a case that we're preparing for a grocery store. So for this case is 2024. It was quite recent. So again, department claims that insufficient need for a manager, and the documents that they have provided and using those documents arguments is business expansion and growth reports. So this business is ongoingly growing in sales and everything, and inventory logistics evidence. So again, managers' involvement with the inventory and logistics of the stocks. Given that it's a grocery store, they had a very high turnover of their inventory, which means that somebody really needs to be on top of that, track it, analyze it, and order. And you can't just order the same set of amounts every week or every time. You need to be able to predict how much you may need, and then so detailed analysis and accurate predictions are required. And of course, about the business expansion and growth. In this case, I believe the manager was given credit to the growth of the business through their excellent management skills and payroll and staff rosters. So this manager was responsible for setting the payroll and rosters, and maybe when I can't remember exactly, but they may have also been responsible for making the payments through the bank accounts. Again, this is one of the things that I mentioned earlier, where the business owner is giving financial authorizations to allow the managers to make business transactions using the business accounts. Marketing and customer growth strategy. So the managers sitting down in their office or small desk and analyzing the data and thinking how they could efficiently market their sales, promotions, and so that they can grow their customer base. So those type of strategies and marketing plans and such may have helped. And owner's affidavit, a letter of support, and workload evidence. So this would have argued case for the owner why they needed a manager. Why couldn't they manage this store by themselves? So that would have been the key element to showing if there is already a person who owns the business, why they need to employ a manager to operate it and oversee the management. So why it worked, business ruled as a significant retail operation. It's not a small shop. So I think they had a few $1 million turnover. So it can't just be like, I think when we are taking on these cases, I would not take on a retail business with less than about $2 million turnover. Yeah, I think anything under 2 million, of course it's not a small business at, by no means, but when we're talking about retail businesses, $2 million turnover gross revenue, it would be considered sufficiently large to justify employing a separate manager in addition to the owner's involvement, I would say. Nominee's role proven to be strategic. So strategic in terms of creating those strategies for marketing and other business operations. So regional restaurant case, regional subclass 187, so RSMS, refused due to lack of genuine managerial role. So this case, even though it's a title is regional restaurant case, I think they chose to go with a retail store manager as the nominated position because the restaurant in itself, it's not the level of a restaurant that would satisfy the caveat. Now, just to be clear, the hospitality caveat does not apply to RSMS, but I think that they made the right choice by nominating the nominee as a retail store manager rather than restaurant manager, even though the business may reflect or have some signs of it being a tiny restaurant, because it allowed the nominee to oversee the overall operation. You know how when you're going on a road trip, or if you've been on a road trip and you stop by a local petrol station or like a petrol station on some random highway, and it may have like a small restaurant or takeaway shop next to like a general goods, groceries and all the other stuff. So it's like a multi-store. So you can't, even though the key, I guess, primary business may be the actual restaurant, but it also sells multiple, other goods. So I think it's that kind of a business. Documents that they used is evidence of managing multiple locations. So it wasn't just one shop, but they oversaw multiple restaurants. And this would be a key argument for one of our clients who's engaging us to sponsor or help them sponsor a retail manager for a very small retail store, but turns out they have multiple retail stores and they just need this manager to go around and manage operation of multiple stores. Business growth and turnover data, payroll, financial management records, and HR compliance documents. So their manager goes around into different stores and signs off on various staffing, compliance, and probably inventory, stock ordering, all those documentations. So that was the main reason why this tribunal has said, oh yeah, actually, you know what, we agree. You are acting as a manager, not just anybody else. An employer had genuine need for the nominee beyond daily store operations. So that was the case. And fast food franchise, similar to KFC, business viability, compliance, evidence, financial and operational, recruitment. So the recruitment challenges is just, a business inability to find any other retail managers, and staffing levels, organizational structure, and training and staff development programs that the manager was part of. Okay, so the business actually had a compliance issue before, but that was not a problem. So adverse information was another factor, but it's not really relevant to our discussion today. And nominee had strategic and financial oversight beyond supervision. So the nominee worked more of a manager, not just a retail supervisor. So one last case, it's a Turkish restaurant, financial oversight, owner statement and workload justification, why the owner couldn't do the management positions. I also had a similar case. It was an Malaysian Indian restaurant in Sunshine Coast. The owner had been operating this business for like 15 years, probably longer now. They decided to sponsor a retail manager because the owner was an owner chef and he's primarily in the kitchen, cooking, and he's been featured on local newspapers and everything. And the tribunal said, yeah, so the owner's just too busy, working as a chef. They just needed a front of house manager to ensure that everything flows efficiently without the owner being away from his kitchen. So similar, the owner's statement and workload justifications, market research, business expansion plans, compliance evidences, and data reports. So again, showing the analysis part of the manager's role is important. Why it worked? The tribunal ruled that retail manager was essential for efficient operations, and nominee's long-term operational control was proven. So one of the other key elements was that the nominee had been working in this business for an extended period of time, and that's why it was easy to, I guess, prepare documentations with evidence of the manager actually doing the managerial and strategic planning role. So the thing is, right, statistic, and this is my observation. It's not, I don't have the correct percentages or correct statistics. And especially in 2016 and 17, the department was actually very proud to be refusing 50% of their RSMS cases, and they were aiming to refuse a lot more. And they said this officially through their road shows. So they invited a select few migration agents and lawyers, and I was lucky few that I went. And yeah, they were very proudly presenting that, yep, they're refusing about 50 cases RSMS or higher, and then they wanted to go higher. And how bad it was back then was they don't even ask. So they keep the application for over a year or two, and then suddenly they refuse the nomination, saying that, oh, the financial documents are more than a year old, and therefore I am not satisfied. And this type of refusal was unheard of. So when a lot of lawyers complained, the department's official response was, it's your responsibility to make sure that the application is up to date. Yeah. So prior to this, immigration was very nice. Like, they used to send us requests, courtesy reminders and all this, but not from that period. It was a very dark period. We used to get so many refusals, even though it was a genuine case. And a lot of the RSMS cases that were refused back then, quite a lot of them have been overturned and have been successful. So when you research the tribunal cases, you'll see quite a lot of report. And of course, these are reported cases. There's tons more unreported cases, which would resemble the reported ones. Key takeaways from the tribunal cases: demonstrate financial operational need, show clear managerial responsibilities, justify why the owner cannot manage alone. So I think that's the starting point. Highlight market challenges and provide organizational and structural evidence. So I think in addition to the retail managers, on the CSOL, I keep saying CSOL because that's what they used to say back in 457 era. There's some other generic occupations. Yes, so there's an occupation called an office manager, which you probably can't see on my screen. Is another occupation that can be scrutinized every now and then. Anyways, so owner's involvement of the business is, in my opinion, one of the key important element that we need to identify and highlight to the case officers, decision makers, and then move on to, okay, so in the absence of the owner, what do they do? Like, what can they do? If the owner dies or goes into coma, can the business run smoothly without it? Or if he cannot, then we don't really need, or the manager is not really working as a manager. That's the type of test that I have in my head. And if they don't have that, then how can we make it so that that's what the nominee will be doing? Like, if in the absence of the owner's day-to-day involvement, what do we need to do to make sure that the manager is actually doing all those day-to-day managerial and taking on those responsibilities? If they're not doing, then how can we make it so that they are doing it, so that by the time that we make the application or the decision is being made, we emphasize those roles. And highlight market challenges, yeah, that's LMT, similar, and then provide organizational structure. So clearly identifying and differentiating the manager, the owner, manager, and if possible, having a separate supervisor. Strategic preparations, yeah, so this is pretty much I've explained it. Yeah, anyways, that's pretty much it for this seminar, information seminar. Did anybody have any other questions?
Kris, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I noticed you mentioned that this occupation is on the CSO list. So if the applicant doesn't want to go down the 4A2 stream, instead he want to apply for the 1A6 stream, is there a skill assessment that he can get? If there is a skill assessment, what types of evidence do you think the applicants need to provide to get the skill assessments for this occupation?
Yeah, very, very good question. Because having a skills assessment can help, and it does help. So the skills assessment requirement is done by VetAssess and retail manager is one, and occupation description. So this fits for retail store, shop manager, fast food manager, news agent, retail bakery manager, quick service restaurant manager. Quick service restaurant manager is generally what we expect to see on highway. Qualification requirements is diploma or higher. Employment, let's see what sort of supporting material assessment, organizational charts. They don't really specify exactly what specific documents that the skills assessing body wants, but if that's the case, then general requirements are for the skills assessment, but it's just a letter of reference, and pay evidence and supporting material is the organizational chart.
So the evidence is quite similar to the evidence we need for the 482 application.
Well, in my opinion, less, because again, 482 or with the department, because the case officer has so much more discretion, and again, from my experience, case officers can use whatever the reason that they wanted to say that, oh yeah, I'm not satisfied with this letter of reference and, you know, organizational chart. I still do, in my opinion, or the occupation resembles more of a supervisor than a manager, and then they could refuse. So this is why we have to work extra hard, and I am interested in what the attitude of the case officers may be at the 482 SID case officers. The reason why I'm doing this seminar, just to show you historically the department as an organization, what their attitude was when they're dealing with this occupation. Again, the series of questions. The first question that I would ask is, what does the owner does? Or if the business has multiple owners, what do they do in their organization? And what makes you so special that you are managing and operating the business? If the owner goes on an extended holiday for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, are you able to operate the business efficiently without the owner's involvement? If not, then you're not a manager, you're more of a supervisor. So that's kind of the thing. So you need to be able to find and establish this. All right, if there's no other questions, thank you. Have a good day.